Yeah, it's going to be great. But it's getting over here with my age. Test. I think it's I think sorry. Hey, right here. I'll just sit down and then you guys call me whenever. Like, I just gotta see where you're like when it's time. Okay, cool. Thanks for being here. Yeah. We're gonna be going off camera, Mike. So should I take this off? It doesn't. It's not going to be working, but just keep it on. Just keep it on. Welcome back, Sam. Okay. Stay delay where it's warm. I know. I'm sorry to respond. I was like, but I wouldn't have minded. Like this. Let's get started. Good evening, everybody. Can everybody hear me okay? I'm gonna go ahead and get started. Everybody can hear okay? Yeah, thumbs up. Great. All right. Well, we really appreciate everybody coming out tonight with this. I think it was 16-degree weather last I checked. So thank you so much, and thank you to our host for providing such a warm space for us tonight. Before we get started, I do want to introduce and call up Alderman Bennett Lawson to the front here. He wanted to just say a couple of words, and I just want to thank him for attending tonight.
Thank you. Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening.
Good to see you all. I'm Bennett Lawson. Welcome back to the 44th Ward. I live a block away. For those of you who are neighbors, so I appreciate seeing you here tonight. I really want to thank Sam and Maria and Jenny. We were all elected on the same night 2 years ago. But you were actually sworn in first, so you've been serving longer than I have in this role, and I appreciate everything you bring to this. You know, I was in a very long city council meeting today, and in talking to my colleagues around the city, there's a lot of district councils that don't really know what to do. They don't know their role, they don't have a focus, they don't have the community engagement. And the 19th district, I think, is exceptional. And when I talk to people around the city, I think they know it too. And so I want to thank the three of you for your dedication to this. And it's tireless and it's unpaid, you know, it's and I think as we talk through issues with public safety, which is a big umbrella. There's a lot of things that come under safety. It's not just the police and violent crime. It's is it safe to cross the street, right? Are the lights working? Our most vulnerable resources we need. And so we take that holistic approach, a comprehensive approach, and you've always had that focus. that's why we're here, right, is to look at all aspects and how we can keep our community safer, improve relationships. I want to thank Lieutenant Allen from the 19th District, who's here as well, who's been in our neighborhood for quite some time. We were talking big events just now, but appreciate you being here. I also want to introduce the guy in the back taking the picture. It's Isaac Troncoso for my staff. He handles public safety among many other things for us. He's also a former member of the Community Commission on Public Safety and Accountability, so he knows this better than I do, I'll be honest. So as we talk about things, you know, it was a long time. One of the things we talked about was leading into tech, right, to improve public safety, using the resources that we have available so we free up officers to do the crime fighting work. I'm so proud that we're able to maintain the CARES car here in the 19th District. I think that's an important resource for us, and I know our counselors have been large advocates there too. And when we can figure out our budget and have some federal money again, we can expand it. And I think that's what everyone needs to do. So Isaac will be here. I can't stay tonight, but I just wanted to thank you and welcome back to 44.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thanks, Alder. Thanks. Thank you so much. I also do want to introduce two people from our Senator Sarah Feigenfeld's office, Sam and Shayna. They're back in the back raising their hands. So thank you so much for being here tonight. And Linda, thank you for joining us as well. We're going to go ahead and get started. We have a lot to talk about. We're excited to introduce our guest speaker, talking about alternative response models. So we're just going to go ahead and do roll call. Sam Schoenberg. Present. Jenny Schaefer.
Present.
Lou Garcia, present. As I mentioned, we're going to dig into the NYU School of Law's report titled Reimagining Public Safety in Chicago. We're also going to have a group conversation tonight, so get ready to chat with your neighbors and chat amongst a few groups. We have some good questions that we want to get your perspective on related to alternative response models in the city of Chicago. So just a heads up that that will be occurring later tonight. No votes tonight, so we're going to go ahead and get into our updates. Did want to remind everybody in terms of the current administration's more than interesting push right now against immigrants in the community. We wanted to know that there are specific rights that our undocumented neighbors do have, so we wanted to share the Know Your Rights information card. If you have passed by the entrance booth, we do have some cards available for folks in the front, so we recommend taking those and passing those out as needed. So please look to those cards so you can pass out amongst the neighborhood. The workforce allocation study, that was the topic of our conversation last month. How many people were there last month? I see a lot of you familiar faces. Okay, great. If you wanted to take a second, we only have 35 responses to that survey that we solicited last month. So if you want to take a second to just take a picture of that QR code, we'd love to get that response rate up to at least 50 people. Again, the point of the workforce allocation study is to understand how we can better allocate our resources within the city. Some of the top priorities that are coming out from those initial 33 responses, as you can see, are implementing community policing strategies, analyzing 911 calls for service, identifying opportunities to increase civilization rate, establish a structure to allow CPD officers to work the same locations on a consistent basis, and address consent decree requirements. So those are the top 5 of the 12 presented in that survey. So if you have a few minutes, we very much recommend taking that 3-question survey. It's very quick. Yeah, I still see some thumbs up. Okay, great. Thank you so much for your participation there. Of course, we are going to post these slides online with links, and we have our newsletter that's going to go out with just a recap of what we covered tonight. So you can also access the survey then.
More on the workforce allocation study. At our last meeting, we talked about how the workforce allocation study really presents a great opportunity for district council members to show really our value add to the city. And one great thing that district councils bring is an ability to collect community voices, really engage community like we are tonight, and being able to give that engagement to city officials. So, and we think that the workforce allocation study is a great place to demonstrate that power that community can bring, and the way that our voices can all strengthen what public safety looks like across Chicago. This is new, right? So a lot of people are trying to understand best how to use us. And so we're really trying to lead the way and advocate for what that could look like. We shared one plan, it's been kind of tweaked and worked on, and it's been lots of conversations and lots of thought about how we are going to make sure the city really works to meaningfully include us. I just got off a conversation this afternoon with CPD as well as other stakeholders across the city to talk about what that will look like for us. We have a proposal here, which basically is district councils getting the information from CPD and Matrix, being able to share that with communities, get your feedback in an organized, thoughtful way, and then have a multiple series of meetings with Matrix so we can share back your feedback and get any questions answered and really make sure that your voices are part of what the study looks like. So obviously there are many people who want to have a voice in what that workforce allocation study looks like. So we have to just keep on advocating to make sure that they know that district councils are important pieces of that. And just so you know, one thing we're targeting, they laid out all these different points, these 5 different points between their phases of what community engagement, when community engagement will occur, really targeting that between the third and fourth phase. So once they do their analysis and start working towards what the development of the new model will be, that feels like to us a really great time to share with the community what that looks like, and to hear from you guys what you want to see in the analysis and where you think officers should be, and questions like that you want to get answered from the workforce allocation study, as well as being an integral part of the final report and making sure that you guys know what's in it and have your questions answered.
I had a conversation with Commander Deshaun and Captain Ford today, and it was interesting because they both said, "Oh, you guys are going to be key parts in that workforce allocation study." And I said, "Actually, we're working to make ourselves more ingrained in that process." And they were shocked as well that district councilors do not play a big role in that process. So we're very much appreciative of their support. And as Jenny mentioned, we're trying to get ingrained into that system as much as possible. Speaking of CPD, so there is a 2026 CPD training input survey specifically looking for your input onto what to make a priority for the Chicago Police Department's training protocols and process. You have an opportunity to provide your input up until March 1st of this year, so we only have a couple more weeks. But as I say here, community feedback is critical to make sure CPD addresses performance gaps and to make sure that their yearly required in-service training promotes sound law enforcement practices, community policing values, and impartial policing. So please take the time to scan this QR code and take this survey. I think it should be about 10 to 15 minutes, if I remember correctly.
And one other initiative we wanted to highlight is the 44th Ward Community Plan that Alderman Lawson, who we heard from earlier, and his office released just a few weeks ago. This is as a little bit of background I live like just 2 blocks from here in the 44th Ward. We are in the 44th Ward tonight. The 19th Police District covers a number of wards, but the only ward that is entirely within the 19th Police District is the 44th Ward. So one of the tenets that we have as a council is that making our communities more knitted together, more vibrant, always keeps us safer. And this plan is really a beautiful start to thinking forward what the 44th Ward can be and look like, particularly as the red purple line project hopefully comes to a close. There's been construction at the end of my block for the last 4 years. So this plan is open for comment from Alderman Lawson's office. It includes 4 core pillars that cover housing affordability, development, and smart density. That's 1. Second is local businesses and commercial corridors. 3 is transit and infrastructure. And 4 is neighborhood amenities. And the plan has some great history about Lakeview and some interesting demographics that you can check out, and sketches out what each of these pillars could look like and what the opportunities are for the neighborhood that we're in right now, and it's open for comment. So we wanted to make sure that folks here knew about it, particularly 44th Ward residents, and had the opportunity to look at it and provide the feedback that is being requested. So on this slide, which again we'll post, you can see a link to the community plan and a link to the survey that is being solicited right now. And Isaac, did you want to say anything else about that, or?
Yeah, I'll just say as well, it does touch on public safety, and we're looking specifically for suggestions for action items on each of the pillars, so concrete ways to achieve what we're talking about here, and we're really getting that from you, from the community. So would love to hear your thoughts. You can also go on our website to fill out the survey, 44thward.org, or come up to me, or again, click on the slide. And yeah, we're looking forward to creating it with you. The last one hasn't been done in about 20 years. So this is the first one in a long time. Hopefully not too long until the next one, but we're looking forward to it.
Thanks, Isaac. Oh, sorry, that's my fault. So in terms of the community partnership plan, we like to give a monthly updates as to our progress. Again, as we mentioned last month, we're really focused on this alternative response model. So you're not gonna see too much movement from last month, but we do have one more completed goal. And this actually should be 38%, not 36, my math is off there, but we wanted to go into specifically the things that we're working on. So I'm gonna turn it over to Jenny.
So in addition to advocating for the workforce allocation study and having a voice in that, we're also really working, as many of you know, we did a 911 call analysis and found around 10% of all calls in the 19th district were related to parking violations. And that's something that we widely heard from the community, as well as many of the alders, that this is, as well as, you know, people within the CPD in the 19th district, that this is not something that police should be responding to. And who else can we have respond to these types of calls? We have been working very, very, very hard to get many different people to try and talk with us and think about what this could look like. We want to do it in like a very thoughtful, thorough way. So we don't want to just put a plan forward and that doesn't have all the stakeholders fully invested and their voices heard and considered. So we have been arranging and trying to arrange meetings with many, many different people. We've been trying to reach out to FOP to have a conversation with them. We've also had a conversation with somebody from the Teamsters Union who represent the LAS ticket takers. And we're trying to, also the SEIU Local 73, we're trying to get a meeting with them. We've been trying to work with city departments, and it has been, they are very hesitant, I think, to make change. I think this is new and it's something different, and we are really, really having to push to get meetings, to get responses from emails, and we will continue to do that. We've reached out to OEMC, which are the 911 call takers, and that center. We've had one meeting with them where I got to go see the inside of OMC and kind of hear how operations run. But when it comes to, okay, now that we, you know, this is what we want to do, where are the things that we would need to think about in order to make sure that OMC is prepared to take on this type of change? It's harder to get those meetings on the books. We're also trying to we've also reached out to the Department of Finance as well as Streets and Sands, to key stakeholders. And again, I just had a phone call with someone from Streets and Sands today to kind of, again, explain what we want and what we're trying to get out of the conversation. And they told me that they would push it up to the next person. So, you know, it's frustrating and it's hard, but we are committed to working with people and really being collaborative in what this looks like. So I think there is a way forward. It just is going to take time and take people willing to be engaged in this conversation.
Can we ask questions now, or do you want to wait till?
Is it about the alternate response? Is it about this alternate response?
I'm not kidding. The ultimate response.
The alternate response.
Alternate response. Yeah, but you know, what you're thinking of that is using some of the existing departments of the city of Chicago and unions versus the hiring issues you guys did such a great study on. I'm sorry I was late. You know, the hiring of civilians is still a huge issue, but you're supplanting it. This is of course much less expensive. Not that the hiring of civilians isn't really that expensive, it's actually inexpensive compared to hiring police officers with all the training itself. Did you say anything about that? I came about 8 minutes late. I mean, these are similar, except you're going to the Department of Finance, well, I don't know who the hell that is, or the head, you should go to the head of the Department of Finance and nail them dead and come and they should be embarrassed by not responding to you. So.
Well, we're letting the community know, and hopefully they will.
Can I just say, give me one more minute, please?
Good.
So did you give yourself a pat on the back for all the research you did for 14 months ago, which was my first meeting? And I was thrilled at what you came out of. That versus LA and New York and now Houston, we are terribly behind of hiring civilians to do jobs that the cops really shouldn't be doing, like the parking issues. Okay? 30 more seconds, please. Because at the 20th council meeting, the commander, Beth, or whatever, you know, she opened up with questions, not necessarily from me, that it was known throughout all the commanders that we're getting beat by New York, LA, and Houston with not using civilians at half the price approximately. I did the research before I came here, versus the cops that have to be trained, you know, car, blah, 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 everything. So we're stuck. I think that should start ASAP. And Superintendent Snelling made a hint at that at the last commissioner meeting that I went to. So I don't know how you put those together, but believe me, you should get, what do you get for, you know, an Oscar or whatever.
It's awesome.
You know, for what you did. And I'm saying it because you won't say you're too modest. But, you know, thank you for that. And maybe we could just confirm what this is really a replacement for the hiring of civilians.
So this one would be a replacement. I mean, you can look at civilianization in two ways, right? It's where are we using officers in jobs that civilians could be filling? And whether it's adding them to the police force to take, you know, I'm not going to say where in the police force civilians should be seated because I think that's the job of the workforce allocation study. But we are saying that we do think that there could be civilians who should be filling these ticket agent positions. And that doesn't even need to be within the department. So we could take these off the plate of the police department, give it to a more appropriate department. So we don't have officers spending their time responding to tickets, and we don't have armed officers with, you know, writing tickets as well. Finding the best people to fit making sure people have the tools that they need to do the job that they're doing.
We have multiple efforts running in parallel. Civilization rate is one, parking violations is another. We're going through multiple avenues to try to get both of these things to happen. So to answer your question is it's not a replacement, it's in parallel. We have one more question back. One more question back.
Same subject. You guys have done a number of meetings where you talked about the same similar issue with the mental health calls going. There was a big campaign to business owners and to residents explaining what to do if you need to make that type of call. And so I presume that in the parking situation, we don't have an alternative place for people to call other than 911. Is that kind of the crux of the problem? So it's So it's like something has to be reallocated, something has to be rejiggered within the system and then publicized so that people will know, here's where you go when you've got a problem with parking situations. Is that
So,
correct?
yes and no, we do have other agencies like the Department of Finance who are able to write tickets, Streets and Sands is able to do tows. I've heard, what we're trying to do is get that information from these departments about how it all works, because it really is very opaque, even to us who've been just trying to get the very basic information of like, how does this work within your department now? I know I've heard from some people that 311 can take parking violations. And then when we talked to someone at OMC recently, they said all 311 calls that are about parking violations go to 911. So we're just trying to get the right people in the right room so we can fully understand it and come up with a plan that works.
What about aldermen, in our 19th district?
Great question.
They wholeheartedly agree, but what are they actually doing to help you?
Great question. So
Excellent segue.
we have worked with Alderman Martin in the 47th ward to put forward a resolution where we are going to present this information to the Public Safety Committee to help kind of build that power to get something done. And especially we're hoping to pilot something in the 19th district that could be then used citywide. I'm also just after my next series of emails and conversations I had with a bunch of people today, had to put in a phone call to Alderman Martin to help us try and get these meetings at the city departments.
So maybe those who have Alderman Martin need to contact him and let him know how they feel about this, their opinions on.
I mean, everyone should, yes, if everyone
That's
wants.
something that you guys need to encourage everybody who attends these meetings all the time on these subject matter to be doing. Because I think that I'd like to think that our aldermen will respond to
We,
requests.
absolutely, and we're happy to report that 5 of the 6 alders that touch our district are in support of this, specifically for parking violations. When we talked about this at a preliminary level, we are tentatively scheduled to present to city council on April 1st, where we are going to have a subject matter hearing on this specifically. Part of that call to action is to get alders, to get district councilors, to get commissioners, and to get community members to sign on to this movement so that we can actually make a lot of noise to get everybody enrolled. To Jenny's point on her last slide, we've talked with many stakeholders that at the overall general level have a large agreement that this is something that we can take off of police's plates and put it onto a different agency. It's just about working through the logistics, the operational side of things. And
It sounds like you're getting.
we are trying to get our ducks in a row to be able to address these things because we know we are going to face barriers, but the work has yet to be done and we're just getting started on that.
Yeah, and it is going to take time. Progress is very, very slow, and it's just something that we will stay consistent in, stay collaborative in, and trying to bring as many people to the table as we can to have these conversations. It's frustrating, it takes time.
Just as far as bringing people together, that includes all of you here, who are hearing this presentation, are hearing from us, are on our newsletter. We do encourage you to be engaged with these meetings, also with your older people. And as we have more opportunities for the public to get involved in this, we will be sure to let you know and make sure that you're aware of when these meetings are happening, when your voice can be heard, because I think it's what we can do as a council is put a spotlight on this issue and help to channel some public support for common sense changes to make our city run better and be safer long term.
And along those same lines, we've been pushing this for the last few meetings, and today when I had a conversation with command staff at 19, I talked about ways that we can optimize the use of our police, because we know that the job description of police has grown very much in the last few decades, and it just doesn't make any sense anymore. And what we have heard from police officers is we want to be police officers, and that means focusing on serious and violent crime and building trust with the community. And I showed this slide specifically to command captains that they were excited. They were actually got animated because what we want to do is focus in on those 5 things. And as we talk about civilization rate and we talk about implementation of alternative response, that's why we're here tonight, and that's why we're trying to rally our community so that we can build the noise and build the advocacy program that we need to make this happen. So as I said before, we have large agreement across the board. It's just about making and taking the appropriate steps to get this actually enacted.
So like Maria said, we are here tonight to talk about alternative response. We've kind of been engaging in that conversation already, and we appreciate it. There'll be more opportunity to do so later. Some of the alternative response topics that we've covered already in district council meetings, the CARE team, which is our mobile mental health crisis response, which is a fantastic thing that we have. We've also talked about our 911 calls for service analysis quite a bit, especially that 10% parking violation. And then we've had communities about the community violence intervention efforts that are happening in Chicago. One thing that I wanted to quickly call out, I know that the Alderman mentioned the CARE team. An important we're going to be touching on this a lot more in our next month's meeting, but an important piece that people need to know about CARE is that it's funded through ARPA dollars, which run out at the end of this year. So we will be moving forward in 2026, we have no funding source for the CARE team. So we need to start advocating for funding now, and we are going to give you ideas on how to do that in our March meeting, so please come back for that. But just to give you guys some ideas of what the costs are for the CARE team, $4 million annually to maintain the current CARE staffing that we have now. There are 6 teams in different districts, and there is 1 team that works across the city, and they operate from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m., which we know is not enough, but it's worth it. That's what it costs to maintain what we have. To expand evenings and weekends, it would be $7 million annually, and those same 7 teams. And to add a new CARE team, it would cost $650,000, which includes crisis clinician and EMT, as well as the outreach supplies, vehicle maintenance, and a portion of their supervisors and their case management teams, as well as overhead costs. So just wanted to give you a heads up that that is something that's coming down the pipeline, and it's really, really important that we start thinking about that soon.
And it is my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker tonight, a returning speaker. I think you might be leading the charge in terms of how many meetings you've been president to. Please, everybody, help me welcome Jose Ponce from the NYU School of Law's Policing Project and Chicago MPI. I'll just go for you. Yeah, that's. Switch.
All right. So yeah, good evening, everyone. My name is Jose Ponce. I'm a engagement specialist, or I'm a senior program manager with the Policing Project. It's a nonprofit out of the NYU School of Law. And really the organization focuses on front-end accountability. And what that looks like is really, traditionally we're used to kind of looking for accountability after harm has been caused or after something has gone terribly wrong. And although there is a role and room for that when it comes to accountability, we also believe there should be guardrails, policies, legislation in place in advance before we have public safety officials go out there and do the job, so that we could avoid harm being caused both to the community and to the officers as much as possible. And so that's what the front end accountability work is about. That is broken down into different areas. We do things around community policing, which we've done here in Chicago for maybe 5-6 years through the Chicago Neighborhood Policing Initiative. Unfortunately, NPI, which is what we call it for short, is not in this district, but it's in 10 districts on the south and west sides of the city. It's been around since like 2019. And the idea behind this is really having a dedicated personnel officers within the district that are dedicated to problem solving. They're not your typical beat officer that's going from call to call, has no time for engagement or follow-up, but instead these are officers that are out there engaging, building networks, coordinating strategies internally within the police department, but also coordinating public safety solutions alongside community members that they work with. The other effort that I'm here really to talk to you about is reimagining public safety, which is what we call our alternative response work and programming. So if we want to go to the next slide, I'll also pull it up.
Use mine too.
Okay, cool. So yeah, I want to start by just, often when we talk about alternative response, and when we talk about policing too, we often are told to call 911, and even if we don't need police, police are sent. And so police are called every day for a lot of different things. And like the council has said, and as you all might know, we're also calling police for a lot of things that maybe they shouldn't be responding to, whether it's a loose dog, whether it's, we talked about a parking violation here. We're calling police for, we did in our research, which I'll talk about, there's a lot of calls going on for alarms, and nationally research shows that 95% of alarms are actually just false alarms. So when we think about how we're utilizing officers' time, and especially in Chicago, when there's a lot of criticism of police response times and gun violence is a big issue, we want our officers to be doing what they're trained to do and what they're best at doing, which is handling violent crime, and instead of handling some of the things that maybe we could hand off or think of an alternative response. So our overview of this report, which is online, it's on our website. Also share it with the council in case maybe they could just share it directly with you. But this report, which we updated in October of last year, covers community policing, our efforts where we analyzed CAPS. We analyzed the program we talked about, Chicago Neighborhood Policing Initiative. And then we also looked at alternative responses. And so for Chicago, we looked at CARE. And then based on our ongoing work, research across the country on alternative responses, we also then proposed some recommendations for the city of Chicago to consider in order to kind of expand what alternative response system looks like here in the city. To do this, we talked to community members. This engagement, I will say, was mostly focused on the south and west sides of the city, talking to organizations, talking to community members, community partners that have been involved with things like CAPS, things like the Neighborhood Policing Initiative. We also talked to people that weren't too fond of police, that maybe weren't ever at any type of CAPS meeting, say. So we try to get a wide range of kind of perspectives on the research that ultimately, we use to couple with actual data and 911 calls for service. So what people said when it came to public safety, it was hard for them to imagine feeling safe. Oftentimes they felt like safety was up to them. They felt isolated. They couldn't necessarily rely on others. Like in other cities, when we would do this kind of level of survey engagement, people might say, well, I could rely on my neighbor. I could rely on the church. I could rely on police, my elected officials. In Chicago, we were a little surprised that we just felt like people were really feeling isolated and didn't believe that there was an ability to achieve public safety. On the next slide, we asked them about their perspectives of the police. That also varied. Oftentimes there was people that felt like they were under-policed in their community, yet over-policed. There was this, again, idea of like, where are the police when I need them or when I call? Again, kind of hinting at response times. At the same time, though, there was an understanding for the tough and challenging job that police officers have. So there was empathy from community members. And although community members couldn't say that they trusted the police department as an institution, they definitely were able to say, I could trust Officer Jones or Officer Smith. They knew specific officers by name. They might have even had their cell phone number. and they felt confident and comfortable that they could try to get police services at least through the officer or officers that they know personally. So I do want to emphasize that. Let's see, again, we asked them about elected officials, same thing. There was this feeling of not really there being accountability with their elected officials when it came to public safety. Community perspectives on alternative responses. We told them, we asked them, hey, what do you know about alternative responses? Many cases, they didn't know what alternative response programming was. When we told them, hey, did you know CARE exists in the city of Chicago? And we gave them a flyer, hey, here's what CARE is. They couldn't believe that CARE existed. They were like, how can this program exist and I don't know about it? How do we get involved? How do my community services become tapped into for CARE responders to be able to leverage and things like of that nature? So it was interesting to see like that they just didn't believe something like this could exist in the city, / they didn't know about it, which is really telling. I'm sorry if I can, and maybe this is I'm gonna digress here, but like this is also one of my challenges too with district councilors, and I'm so happy that ECPS passed and we have civilian oversight. The city itself, in my opinion, didn't do the greatest job either at promoting district councilors and educating people and informing them about what they are and what they do and how they can, come to the meetings and help them exercise their powers. So I'm not surprised when community members say, I didn't know CARE existed. I'm not surprised if you go down the street and people say, I didn't know that this meeting was going on here. So it's, just again, reaffirming some of the things that as a Chicagoan and lived experience I've felt before. I'm going to the next, I want to dive into now 911 calls for service. And we looked at the 911 calls from 2023. And then we looked at the calls that CARE handled. And what we saw was, again, as you all know, CARE handles very specific call types. So you see here, CARE was dispatched and CARE handled in a 2-year period that we looked at calls. This number is a little off. It's about 1,400 calls that they responded to. And in comparison, we have other cities that, as you see there, no disrespect to, cities like Albuquerque, but we do have a lot more resources, a lot more wealth here in Chicago. And I personally don't believe that there's a reason why we should have less calls than we do in these cities when it comes to a 2-year span. Now, a lot of this, again, as you know, if we go to the next slide, it has to do with how CARE operates. It's very limited in its operation. It's not across the whole city, as you saw on the map. Monday through Friday, very limited hours, limited call types. So we're not going to get really a full insight on the potential and the promise that something like CARE might have, just because of its low capacity right now. In comparison, there's models out there that are proven that are operating 24/7. So I encourage you all to look into those and encourage our elected officials to, hey, we could do more. We could be more innovative. Continuing on, looking at the calls for service. Again, there was like these 1,200 or 1.2 million calls in 2023. Based on our research, and based on what other alternative response models are doing across the country, we estimated that about 34% of those 911 calls could have been handled by somebody else other than an officer. And I think, as you see here, the kind of little breakdown, the types of calls that we think are we already see other cities handling, again, things around auto-related things, animal-related things, reporting, traffic incidents with no major injuries, or nothing where it was a hit and run or anything like that. There's a lot of examples out there that are already being, taken and trying to see, hey, like how are we really using our resources effectively so that the officers are able to do what they're supposed to. If we go to the next slide, this is kind of just a further breakdown again of the calls. This parking thing, we coupled parking along with other vehicle related things like towing and stolen vehicles. So that's why the number here is like over 100,000 calls versus the 60,000 calls or so when it came to just parking. Traffic collisions, again, I mentioned here, these are just possible things we can expand to, along with the number of calls that 911 received for the analysis we did. We could skip this slide, go to the next. And so now I kind of want to take us and just talk through a little bit more about just the parking issue here. And as was said, you know, in your district, the number was about 10%. That's citywide, that's about what we found as well, 10% of calls. And we could reduce, you know, how we use officers and the time officers spend on that if we strengthen non-first response. That means parking and things of this nature aren't an emergency response issue. So why are we using emergency responders to handle this issue? And then increasing capacity of the Department of Finance. So in Chicago, we kind of already have given that responsibility of like ticketing to the Department of Finance, but we could still do more if we could just figure out how we get dispatch, like to start dispatching these Department of Finance enforcement personnel to start taking calls from dispatch to be able to, you know, handle these things. So right now that doesn't exist. That's something that could be a next step, for example. And then we just want to kind of highlight some other cities that are already doing this. And, you know, whether it's San Jose, Virginia Beach, Berkeley, there are cities out here that are thinking about how are they combining city departments and their responsibilities to take on some more of these non-emergency issues. And whether that's hiring civilian non-sworn personnel, that could be, again, I'm not advocating for either or, but there are examples of people being hired as non-sworn personnel within the police department and handling these kind of things. I think Virginia Beach does that, and so does San Jose. But then there are other efforts where it's just completely a different department and it has nothing to do with the police department itself. There is a lot more research, and all of this could be found on our website, policingproject.org. I encourage you all to visit the website, and I definitely want to again extend to the counselors and to the community here. Like, if there is anything that Policing Project could do, we've hosted in the past webinars. We bring together stakeholders from across the country for you know, a community of practice so we can learn from each other. So as you all kind of launch into this effort and are starting to think about, okay, who are all the people we need to talk to? What is the plan that we need to create? The pathway to actually get and develop a stronger alternative response program. We'd always be happy to help and step in any way we can. So I want to thank you again. Stop there. Yeah.
Question?
Just want to say thank you to Jose. Yeah, do you mind feeling of
Yeah.
questions? Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I know, it's been a while.
Okay.
You know, this is a lot of data. My head is swimming with, you know, what's there and what the percentages. It's really swimming. It's a lot of data. It's very useful. But what I'm thinking as you're talking, you know, the 19 council trio and yourself, if you really certify it somehow, how'd you do your research? Is it legitimate? I mean, people are gonna ask that question. Put it together and give it to Matt Martin, and that would be impressive. That you're working in different areas and different people and groups, obviously. But if you put it together and say 8 pages of this is what we found, and we know it's accurate, I'll bet that Matt Martin does something with that, bring it to the right people. You know, it's gotta go up.
Yeah. I will say, you know, obviously I would always support and partner the counselors in doing that. Happy to share that. I will say personally also what we've done is share it with counselors across the city, but also we began meeting with commissioners from the CCPSA just to let them know, hey, here's what we found and what can we do to further help advocate and put you in position to advocate for the things you want to do? Because ultimately, we're just an organization that's done research. Nobody, the city's not going to listen to us unless community members and others come together and say we want this. So we're here to lend our expertise. I know when the commission did the special hearing on pretext stops, we offered and we did get some of our partners to come in and be speakers just to present and share more about pretextual stops. We could do that for alternative response when the time's appropriate.
Yeah, I mean, I just think we have been collaborating and bringing as many people to the table as possible. The Inspector General's office has also has a great data dashboard of calls for service that happen across the city. So bringing all these stakeholders together is something that we are working towards doing.
I was just gonna mention, Mike, this is a, what, 60-ish page report that you published? So lots to dig into, you know, very much recommend getting yourself a nice hot cup of tea and digging in. We'll be providing the link to that report specifically. One question?
Jennifer earlier was talking about the cost of this project, and you know, it apparently is going to end. In your analysis of CARE, sorry, I should have said she was talking about the CARE project, pardon me. In your analysis of the CARE response, do you have like return on investment information that you could like give to alders to say, hey, look how much this benefits and how much money this saves us? Is there any research you've done or others have done to talk about that specifically here in Chicago or elsewhere?
Yeah, I don't think the CARE research report did that. I want to say though, we might have done that in other cities that have more established 24/7 models, for example, that have been evaluated. What I can do is try to like dig into that research and then see if it exists. If it does, I'm sure it'll be useful for you all, and I would be happy to send that to you all. But yeah, that's very important to consider.
And I think one other thing that makes that research hard is that there's been a pilot program of the CARE, which was even in more limited districts. And then they kind of shut down the CARE program for an extended period of time to kind of reboot it with this new model of a complete, no longer co-responder, so no police officer any longer on that team. So there's been a lot of stopping and starting of the CARE team, and also a lot of need for the CARE team to be trusted within the same city departments to be able to respond to a wider number of calls. You saw how few calls that they've been allowed to handle. So like making sure that one of the things I know the CARE team does is they listen to dispatch. And if they hear a call that they think they should go to, they self-dispatch. And the city's also working to make sure OMC feels more comfortable dispatching the CARE team. Because I think we do, need to make sure that we have a larger response than what we're seeing right now with our CARE team.
All right, we're gonna turn to our community conversation portion of the meeting tonight. So we have about 25 community members here. We are gonna explain what we want in just a second, but be prepared to break into groups of 4 to 5 folks, small groups. Before we get into this, I wanted to remind everybody specifically of what we've delved into in terms of 911 calls analysis. As of our latest analyses, we can see that the top 10 reasons Chicagoans call 911 are listed here on the right. And I'll start from the top. They are medical related, assistance request, disturbance, vehicular, alarm, parking, domestic, battery, police activity, and assault. Inherently, only those 3 bottom ones are very much related to violence. There are, domestic and disturbances that can lead to violence. But we want to understand from you, what scenarios would you be comfortable offloading from the police's responsibility and onto another agency? We're not thinking through specifically which agency is going to take that on, but in an ideal state, who would respond to those types of calls? As you can see, those top 7 very much eligible to be addressed by other folks that are non-police officers. And I just want to say that we have buy-in from CPD members on this general idea. So, we love the fact that that is supported there, but we also want to understand, what are your thoughts? What are your concerns? Why do you think this could work? Or what barriers do you think we're going to need to work through? Just so that you have this as a reference point, I just labeled 7 different call types. It could mean different type of things. We have the descriptions as to what those means on this slide, and also in the piece of paper that was handed out to you as you walked in. Additionally, we do have parking and mental health on here. We know that the CARE team is a agency that is already an alternative response system. We have talked about parking violations and how that could be taken by the Department of Finance. We would love for folks to focus on the other 6 things that were highlighted in blue, right? So things like medical related, assistance request, you can see that includes well-being checks, disturbances, barking dog is included in there, music or noise complaint, vehicular, auto accidents. We heard from Jose just now that maybe not all traffic accidents have to be addressed by police officers. We have alarms, as their report showed, 95% of alarms tend to be false alarms. We also want to, probe on some of the more sensitive topics like domestic abuse. We want to understand what concerns would you have, any lived experiences of you or your loved ones or friends that we should know about as we consider these alternative response models. So as I said before, we wanted to dive into specific questions. So we're going to break out into 4 to 5 person groups. Sam, Jenny, myself, and Jose will be, and Elise are going to be facilitators. So you don't have to move very far. Just make sure that you get in a group where you're not, bothering other folks with noise levels. I know it's an echoey room, but we're going to be facilitators. We're going to help guide the conversation, but we really want to hear from you specifically. Which of the call types would be your top choices for alternative response? And which of the call types would be your top choices for police response? So at the end of this, we're going to take some time for each group to read out specifically what their choices would be. And then we can conclude the meeting with a public comment portion of the meeting. So this isn't going to be a survey. This is going to be a community just conversation. One of the things that we've heard from the community is that we spend a lot of time up here talking at folks, informing folks of specific topics. We should be soliciting community members' experiences, your perspectives, because as we move towards our initiatives that are going to be geared towards implementing alternative response, we want to make sure that we have a pulse check on what the community wants and what the concerns are. So when I'm talking about, maybe I'm moving well-being checks off of the police's plate, I want to be informed properly by the community and your perspectives. So we also just want to take a moment so that we can put our ear to the ground and know that we're not projecting solely our perspectives and our opinions as district councilors, that we are actually enrolling your voice in our efforts as we move forward, moving towards things like parking violations becoming alternative response. And so that this could be an alternative response model that doesn't just include parking violations, but things broader than that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Another question?
Okay, just on that, I want to see the opposite.
Okay.
So I go to a lot of DC meetings, all different districts, and this is rare. So I even thought, oh, this is awesome. So I'm on the opposite. I think it's needed and it's great.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, and we recognize that we come with educational materials, we send a lot of surveys, and we want to do these community conversations. Of course, participation is encouraged but optional. And yeah, without further ado, we should just get to getting. All right, everybody, thank you so much for your time tonight, and thank you for participating. We're just gonna go ahead and quickly summarize what we've heard. So, Elisa and Jose, do you guys want to come up and take part? No, sorry. Okay, in our group, we had a great discussion. We started off talking about domestic disturbances. Is that the right situation in which we don't have a police officer because they're often related to violence, but what we netted is maybe having a co-responder model where we have a social worker respond to the domestic disturbance call and then have police there in case it does go violent. We also talked about making sure that we have the right resources addressing every single type of problem that requires a specific type of response. So, and it's also a little bit difficult to understand as a community member calling 911 and telling exactly what resource you need to request. It's more about this is something that needs an immediate response, and then OEMC and the dispatchers appropriately play operator and connect us to the right resources. Yeah, those are the two big things that stuck out. Again, thank you to our group.
Our group talked a lot about how parking violations impact especially people who have handicaps or in wheelchairs or are blind, and how that really makes you go out into the traffic and it becomes a more dangerous situation. So a lot of times that actually is an emergency response, and getting someone out as soon as possible is very important. We also talked about the idea of like a community safety responder to address a lot of these calls that we were talking about that are not the violent calls, but like disturbances or alarms and things like that. Having someone who is unarmed kind of come out to triage the situation, see what's going on, and then if needed, call in the police or get the right response for that person in crisis. And we also talked about domestic disturbances as well, and that might be a spot where that could quickly escalate, and having the right people there is important. So a co-response model might be something to consider as well.
In our group, in thinking about where you draw the line between where you want a police officer to respond versus a non-police officer, the top question that came up for us was what has the potential to turn violent or dangerous, and so making sure that you're parsing carefully what types of calls might really have that risk, and making sure that officers respond where they're necessary for their. We talked about, as we discussed earlier, that parking violations are a high volume of calls in the 19th district, and that's really what we kind of see as low-hanging fruit for consensus that alternative response might be appropriate. But looking at some of these other types of calls, like domestic disturbance that we discussed earlier, having to make sure that OEMC 911 dispatchers are well-trained and know how to ask the right questions so they can get the right information and understand what the right response would be to send to that particular type of crime. And also type of situation. The other thing that stood out to me, and I took fuller notes so to my group, know that this is just a summary and not everything. But if we're thinking about moving towards alternative response, really making sure to front how much money it will cost and how much money it will save, to double click on the question that we got earlier about the CARE program. And so that's an issue for further research that I want to make sure we can find some resources on for how much money we could save as a city. It's already facing difficult budget situations, and how much it would cost to create these kinds of alternative structures.
All right. I can stand aside. Yeah, so I guess for our group, we talked about one of the things that came up was medical. Like when are we sending police, and for what medical reasons? Was something we talked about. We definitely talked about some things that maybe we don't want officers responding to, like a barking dog. The other thing we talked about, noise complaints. Like we talked about, like, who would respond to a noise complaint? Like if it's not an officer, it's not going to be the Department of Finance, is what we talked about. But then we talked about, like, maybe it could be like a community group that has ties to that neighborhood. I've seen on the south and west sides, like violence interrupters sometimes play a role in when there's like large gatherings or loitering happening, which some community members are maybe feeling some type of way about. Other things we talked about here were, let's see, a co-response model for domestic calls. Also, the group also felt like we still need to consider a police response for things like assault and battery, or figuring out what that means, and making sure officers are responding to those appropriately, as well as anything that involves things like forensics or like any type of police like skill or tool that needs to be deployed. Generally, the group also thought like there's a lot of support for alternative response programming here within the district. I think they're curious though, like what does that support look like across the city? Can we get that support? This is something that was talked about, is like, oh, what would the union, the FOP think about something like this? I'm a strong believer in like, regardless of what you think about police, I think we could agree that we could see less gun violence in the city, and we could free up officers to be doing some more of that work. And we could also probably agree that an officer shouldn't be responding to a barking dog, for example. I hope there's a medium there. I don't know, group, if I missed anything. All right. You can tell them stretch that.
I think all of our groups pretty much said the same thing. Co-response would probably be the best option, because for most of these, with the exception of the barking dog, a police officer definitely needs to respond to most of these, and a little bit more education, because our group were pretty much said that some of the stuff, they don't even know why some people would even call the police as well. Specifically for a car alarm specifically. But for most of them, a co-response, but the CPD definitely would need to respond first, and then they would assess the situation and then kind of report out if there is another alternative response person or organization that could assist.
Interesting. Thank you.
Can I make a little addition to that?
30 seconds.
We'll do 30 seconds, Mike.
You got it. We had the benefit and luxury of a lieutenant who made things more real and practical.
Yeah.
And judgmental, and a lot more co-responses that I thought would be necessary. But I think experience of 20+ years in a degree from the University of Chicago to prepare him for that, and with all that experience, I think sometime in the near future, having this gentleman or someone like him, the lieutenant, I think he was the captain who was supposed to be, would be excellent. Would bring the reality of what happens on the street with this kind of process.
Yeah, absolutely.
2 minutes? No.
That's good. You're good. Thank you, Mike. No, that's a great call out. One of the things that we want to do at the subject matter hearing, when we're going to speak to city council on parking violations specifically, is to have someone from CPD representing CPD's perspective. The thing about that is that then we have to respect the legal implications of CPD members speaking openly at our community conversations like this. One of the things I would love for Commander Gisani to come and speak about that specifically. We've had private conversations where we generally agree on these things, but getting into the weeds, it does lead to some sort of legal and bureaucratical resistance from CPD, which I understand. But yeah, to Mike, point taken. I have to enroll CPD in this as well, understand their perspective, and that's one of the things that we've been trying to do, as Jenny mentioned, along with our stakeholder wrangling that we've been doing. CPD is amongst them. All right, so we're wrapping up. I know we have 2 public comments. If there's anybody else that would like to make a public comment, please see Elise in the back left. She will give you a form to quickly fill out. Next meeting, just so you know, there has been a date and location change. It's March 19th at Lady Tech College Prep. That's at 2501 West Addison. And then we're going to go into the public comment. But before we do that, I know we have this slide in terms of community groups. We moved it from the front of the presentation now to the back, so if there's anybody part of a community group that wants to let us know about specific events, now's the chance to inform the community. We got one, then. You have flyers?
No, give me a second.
Yeah, no worries, no worries.
Or more than a second.
We could do the public comment.
Yeah, and then just know that you can put out those flyers at the front table too, so people can take them out as they leave the space. We'll go ahead and
Can I
start.
actually go?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so I'm Zuri, a private organization called One Northside, Tarina, are also here. Yeah, we are just have been going around all the district council meetings, like in Northside neighborhoods. And we have an upcoming meeting coming up tomorrow, actually, it'll be at our office, which is in Uptown at 4750 North Sheridan, as well as also on Zoom. And so if you're interested in coming, you just hit up me or it's me tomorrow.
Great. One Roadside meeting tomorrow night, 4750 North Sheridan.
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We're gonna go ahead and move to the public comment. We can have 2 minutes per speaker. Once again, state your name and spell it for the record, and we will start with Kamala S. You want to come up and just take the mic? Yeah.
Hello, I'm Kamala, Kamala, and I wanted to talk to the council tonight and to all of you to share that I think that district council and the CCPSA should take a necessarily skeptical and adversarial culture towards policing and our cultural institutions in this city. I think that if you had a shop foreman that was flooding his work site with toxic exposure, that shop foreman would be separated from that work site and removed from those workers. I think that there's no other profession or professional space where you might have a mandated reporter type of function where this type of situation would be allowed, where you're encouraged to create trust between an abusive, dominant, violent actor and the community. So you need to really think about redefining, reshaping what this means according to the authorizing language of your legislation. And I don't mean to be insulting, but this does not take a 6th or 7th or a high school or a high school level reading level to interpret this in a way that avoids encouraging an abusive relationship between the city and police. Also, I would hope that you would work towards, or at least encourage, bans on facial recognition and gait recognition technology and unnecessary biometric surveillance. Also, that you would work to rapidly unwind drug enforcement, gang enforcement, firearms enforcement, and prostitution enforcement, because they are the drivers of violence. They are not remedies to the violence. And I would like to remind you that policing and police are primary drivers of disability, secondary drivers of disability, and tertiary drivers of disability. So I think that the council should keep that in mind. And you should also ban police observation devices. Side with the experts like the ACLU who have been calling for this for over a decade. Don't side with fascism. You have the authority here. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, our next speaker is Emma Shankman. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Emma. I'm here to talk about gets really kind about how our houseless neighbors are treated by CPD. In the 19th district specifically, I've noticed in the past couple of weeks, I've seen multiple arrests on Irving Park and Sheridan of our houseless neighbors, and these arrests always seem kind of aggressive. Like, for instance, I saw one today, and there were like 6 officers for this one person, and I was like, it was, I mean, emulated to the whole thing, but clearly this was not an armed and dangerous person. And I've seen incidents like this multiple times actually on that like specific like crossing. And I think, I'm not exactly sure how that could be remedied, but maybe that could be something else that is given to an alternative response group. Because our homeless neighbors always seem incredibly frightened, and they are already living in misery, especially in the winter. And I just wanted to encourage that we kind of include that in discussions of calls that could go to groups other than police who may be frankly more helpful to these particular neighborhoods and the particular issues that they face. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it.
All right, well, let's reminder calls to action. Just take us up on office hours. They're available. So please be aware that they're there for you, and you can get in contact with us as always via email 19thdistrictcouncil@gmail.com. This presentation is going to be posted on our website, so stay tuned for that. I want to take the time to, right before we.
I'm just gonna put this out there. We are looking for someone to help us with social media. I'm looking for someone to help me with social media because I right now do it and I am not good at it. And would love somebody to help us do that. So if you or anyone you know is interested in helping the 19th District Council, just get the word out and make sure more and more people know about the work we're doing. Please contact me.
And now we'd like to thank our hosts. Thank you so much to the Chicagoland Community Church for hosting this very warm night inside, and I know it's very cold outside, so thank you so much for hosting us.
Thank you so much for all the work that you guys do, and we're so grateful for the community and also for the work of police officers. It's such a blessing that we're able to get together as a community and discuss these issues, and I just want everyone to know that we are praying for our neighborhood, and we're praying for the police, and we're praying for the council as well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. With that, we'll call the meeting at 8:05. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
Stay warm.